All right, so large language models, LLMs. You've heard all the hype. You want to know more? Well, you came to the right place. We're going to do a deep dive into this wild world of AI that can practically write and code like a human, and even translate languages, sometimes even better than we can.
It really is kind of mind-blowing when you stop and think about it.
Yeah. So to guide our deep dive today, we're going to be looking at a Stanford University report by Jörg-Owe. We'll mention him again at the end, but let's get right to it. One of the big things you always hear with LLMs is deep learning. What does that even mean?
So deep learning, imagine like a digital brain with these layers upon layers of interconnected nodes, like a massive neural network. And those nodes, they process information and they learn. And they keep refining their understanding based on all the data they're fed.
It's more than just like stuffing a computer full of all of Shakespeare's works and hoping it learns to write like him.
Yeah, it's a little more complicated than that. But while Shakespeare might be part of it, we are talking about mountains and mountains of data, books and articles and code, even just the entire internet.
Wow.
That's how these LLMs develop such a sophisticated grasp of language.
So how do they learn from all that data? There's this thing called self-supervised learning. I hear that a lot. What is that?
Imagine you're reading a sentence and the last word is missing. You can probably guess what that word should be.
Yeah.
Based on the context. Well, that's essentially what LLMs do. But on a massive scale, they're constantly predicting the next word, adjusting their understanding, and building up this knowledge of language structure and meaning.
So it stands to reason that the more data, the better the LLM. Is that why there's been such rapid evolution just in the past few years?
Absolutely. We went from Eliza back in 1966, one of the very first chatbots that could mimic conversation, to the transformer architecture in 2017, which was this huge turning point that made language processing so much more efficient.
And then from there?
And then things really took off. We had BERT in 2018, focused on understanding the relationships between words, then GPT-2, and then GPT-3 in 2020, which had 175 billion parameters.
175 billion. I can't even fathom that number.
It's hard to wrap your head around. But essentially, the more parameters an LLM has, the more nuanced its understanding of language becomes. It's like having a brain with billions of connections, all working together.
And that's what led something like GPT-3 write like a human.
Exactly. And GPT-4, even bigger, potentially trillions of parameters.
It's like an AI arms race.
Yeah, it's moving incredibly fast.
So OpenAI, they created GPT. But are there any other big players in the LLM game?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Google has been doing a lot in this field. They developed BERT, which is amazing at understanding context.
Right.
And that makes it really powerful for things like search. They've also developed other notable models like T5 and PaLM2.
So different LLMs have different strengths.
Right.
What about access, though? Are these tools just limited to big companies like Google and OpenAI?
Actually, we are seeing this really interesting trend toward open source models, like Llama, for example. This means that researchers and developers around the world, they can access and use and experiment with this technology.
So it's becoming more democratized.
Exactly. But that also opens up all these new questions about control and responsibility.
Right.
Something to consider.
But first,
maybe we should dive into what these LLMs can actually do.
Yeah, let's get into the applications. I feel like every day I hear about a new way LLMs are being used.
Yeah.
It's kind of mind-blowing, like content creation. LLMs are writing articles and marketing copy and even movie scripts these days. Are we seeing the end of human creativity as we know it?
I think that might be a bit dramatic.
Okay.
At the end of the day, LLMs are tools. And like any tool, they can be used for good or for bad.
Right, but these tools are producing some really impressive stuff. Does that mean human writers and artists are going to become obsolete?
I see it more as a shift. LLMs will probably change how creative work gets done. Imagine a screenwriter using an LLM to help brainstorm ideas or to generate different dialogue options.
Oh, wait.
Or a journalist using an LLM to summarize a really dense research paper.
So it's more about collaboration than replacement.
Exactly. It's about augmenting human creativity, not getting rid of it. And content creation is really just one piece of the puzzle. LLMs are also powering chatbots. But these aren't your average chatbots. They can actually understand what you're asking and give helpful responses.
Yeah, that would be a nice change. I feel like most chatbots just make me want to pull my hair out.
I know what you mean.
So what else can these LLMs do?
Well, they can generate code.
Really?
Yeah, which could really revolutionize software development. Think about an LLM writing basic code snippets. And that frees up the developers to focus on the bigger picture, the more creative aspects.
So instead of replacing programmers,
Yeah.
it's more about making them more efficient.
Right. Automating the tedious stuff.
And then there's text summarization. We're living in this age of information overload.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
LLMs could be amazing at taking huge amounts of information and condensing it down into something easy to understand.
That would be a game changer, especially for anyone who needs to stay on top of the latest research or even just the news.
Right.
What about languages? Could LLMs be used to translate languages?
Definitely.
Yeah.
They're already making huge progress in that area.
Yeah.
They might not be able to perfectly capture all the nuance of human language, but they're getting really good at translating text.
It's kind of wild to think about how this technology could change things.
Yeah,
Boost creativity, help us communicate better.
absolutely.
But with all this potential, there must be some downsides.
Oh, yeah. There are some very real concerns.
The things that keep people up at night when they think about AI.
Exactly.
Like, what if LLMs make mistakes? Or even worse, what if they're used to spread misinformation?
That's a very real concern.
We've all seen those deep fakes. They're getting harder and harder to distinguish from reality. And as LLMs get more sophisticated, it's only going to get harder to tell what's real and what's fake.
So what can we do about it? Can we put the genie back in the bottle?
I don't think it's about stopping progress altogether. It's about being responsible. We need safeguards, ethical guidelines, maybe even regulation.
That sounds like a big task.
It is.
Who's responsible for making that happen?
I think it's a collective responsibility. Researchers,
Yeah.
developers, policymakers, even the general public. We all need to be part of the conversation, talking about the potential risks and benefits of this technology.
That makes sense. It feels like we should be having those conversations now.
I agree. We can't wait until it's too late.
This all feels pretty heavy.
Yeah.
Maybe we can lighten things up a bit, talk about some of the exciting developments on the horizon for LLMs.
Absolutely. It's important to acknowledge the potential downsides, but it's also important to remember the incredible possibilities.
It could give us some reasons to be optimistic.
One of the most exciting areas is multimodality. Imagine LLMs that can understand not just text, but images, audio, video.
Whoa.
It opens up a whole new world of possibilities for how we interact with AI.
So instead of just processing words on a page, these LLMs could be analyzing a movie, understanding the dialogue and the visuals and the music all at the same time.
Exactly. AI that can perceive and understand the world in a way that's closer to how we do it.
That's amazing.
Another really cool area is real-time adaptation. LLMs that can learn on the fly, becoming more intuitive and responsive over time.
So it's not like you're talking to a script. The AI can actually understand the flow of the conversation.
That's the goal. AI that feels more natural, more engaging.
And of course, there's the issue of energy efficiency. Training these massive LLMs takes a lot of computing power.
You're right. Sustainability is really important. Researchers are working on more energy-efficient training methods and ways to reduce the environmental impact.
It's good to know people are thinking about those things.
Absolutely. We need to make sure that progress happens responsibly.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
From the technical stuff to the ethical challenges.
Yeah.
To the exciting possibilities.
It's been a fascinating conversation.
It really has. Before we wrap up, I want to mention Jörg-Owe report again, of the one from Stanford.
Oh, yeah.
It was really insightful.
Definitely worth checking out.
We'll put a link in the show notes.
Good idea.
Okay. So before we go, I want to leave our listeners with something to think about. We've talked about the potential benefits of LLMs and the risks. Yeah. The challenges and the opportunities. But the future of AI, it's not set in stone.
No, it's not.
We get to shape it. So I want to ask our listeners, what excites you most about LLMs? And what worries you? These aren't just tech questions. They're questions about the future we're building.
A future we create together.
All right. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of LLMs.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll be back soon to continue our exploration. Until then, keep thinking, keep learning, and keep exploring.
And don't be afraid to ask questions.
That's right. Thanks for listening.
See you next time. So we were talking about LLMs and all the good they could do.
Right. Like changing the world, making things better. But I have this nagging feeling that it can't all be sunshine and roses.
Well, no technology is without its downsides.
So what are we talking about here? What are the potential downsides of LLMs?
Well, one of the big ones is what happens when LLMs make mistakes.
Like what kind of mistakes?
They could give out wrong information Or even be used to spread misinformation.
Right. So like those deep fakes you see online that are getting harder and harder to spot.
Exactly. And as LLMs get even more advanced, it's only going to get more difficult to tell what's real and what's not.
That's a little scary. Is there anything we can do about it?
Well, I don't think we can just stop progress.
Right.
But we can definitely guide it responsibly.
What does that look like?
We need safeguards, ethical guidelines, maybe even regulations.
That sounds like a lot.
It is.
So who's in charge of making sure all that happens?
It's not just one person or organization. It's a collective responsibility. Researchers, developers, policymakers, even just the general public.
So we all need to be thinking about this.
Exactly. We need to have open and honest conversations about the potential risks and benefits of LLMs.
You know what? I was reading Schneppat's report,
Mm-hmm.
and he made this really interesting point.
Oh, yeah.
He said that instead of talking about the future of AI,
Yeah.
we should be talking about the AI of the future.
That's a really interesting way to think about it.
What do you think he means by that?
Well, to me, it sounds like he's saying that AI isn't just some separate thing.
Right.
It's woven into our own evolution.
Really?
Yeah. It's part of how we understand intelligence,
Wow.
how we relate to technology, and ultimately the future we create for ourselves.
Well, it's not just about how AI will change the world. It's about how it will change us.
Exactly.
That's pretty mind-blowing.
It is. And it's something we need to be talking about as a society.
So what's the takeaway for our listeners here? What should they be thinking about when it comes to AI?
I think the most important thing is awareness.
Awareness of what?
Be aware of the power of this technology. Be aware of how it can be used for good or for bad.
Okay.
Be critical of the information you come across online, because some of it might be generated by AI.
Right.
And most importantly, be part of the conversation. Ask questions, share your concerns, help shape the future of AI in a way that aligns with your values.
I like that. So we've talked about the potential downsides of LLMs, about how we need to be responsible, even about how AI might change us as humans. But there are also a lot of really exciting things happening in the world of LLMs.
Absolutely.
Things that could make our lives better.
Yeah.
Make the world a better place.
There's so much potential.
So let's dive into some of those exciting developments. Give us some reasons to be optimistic.
Well, one of the most exciting areas of research right now is multimodality.
Multimodality.
Yeah. Imagine LLMs that can understand not just text, but also images and audio and video.
So they can understand like a whole movie.
Exactly. They could analyze the dialogue, the visuals, the music, all at the same time.
That's incredible.
It's about creating AI that can experience the world in a much richer way.
So much closer to how we experience it.
Right.
That's amazing.
Another exciting area is real-time adaptation. LLMs that can learn as they go, becoming more intuitive and responsive over time.
So it's like the AI is actually learning from you.
In a way. Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
It would make interacting with AI feel a lot more natural.
I can see that. Yeah. And of course, there's the whole issue of energy consumption. Training these huge LLMs takes a lot of power.
Yeah, you're right. Sustainability is definitely a concern.
So what are people doing about that?
Researchers are looking into more energy-efficient training methods and ways to reduce the environmental impact of AI.
It's good to know people are thinking about that.
It's important.
So, multimodality, real-time adaptation, energy efficiency. These are all really exciting developments.
We're just scratching the surface.
I can't wait to see what the future holds for LLMs.
Me neither.
Okay, so we've talked about the incredible potential of LLMs, and we've also acknowledged the very real concerns they raise. But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to circle back to Jörg-Owe Schneppat's Stanford report for a moment. There was one point he made that really stuck with me.
Oh, yeah.
He said, and I'm paraphrasing here, we often talk about the future of AI, but perhaps we should be talking about the AI of the future.
Huh. That's a really interesting way to put it.
It is. What do you think he meant by that?
I think he's highlighting that AI, especially LLMs, they're not just some separate technology evolving on their own little island.
Right.
They're deeply intertwined with our own evolution.
As humans.
As humans, with our understanding of intelligence, our relationship with technology, really the whole future we're creating.
So it's not just about how AI will change our world, but how it will change us.
Exactly.
That's a pretty profound thought.
It is.
Yeah.
And it's a conversation we need to be having.
As a society.
As a society.
So what's the takeaway for our listeners? What should they be thinking about as they go about their day? Interacting with technology. Maybe even using LLMs without realizing it.
Awareness.
Awareness.
Be aware of the power of this technology. the good and the bad.
Okay.
Be critical of the information you see online, knowing that some of it might be generated by AI.
Right.
And most importantly, engage in the conversation.
About AI.
About AI. Ask questions. Share your concerns. Help shape the future of AI in a way that aligns with your values.
That's a great message.
Thanks.
We've covered a lot of ground today in our deep dive into large language models. A huge thank you to Jörg-Owe for his insightful report, which really guided our conversation.
Yeah, it's a great resource.
You can find a link to the full report in our show notes.
Definitely check it out.
Thank you to all our listeners for joining us on this journey.
It's been a pleasure.
And remember, the future of AI is in our hands. So let's make it a good one.
I'm optimistic.
Me too. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive.